Support comes from the Janice Hawkins Cultural Arts Park on the main campus of Troy University, featuring the International Arts Center, the Fred Nall Hollis Museum, and the Hua Baoju Gallery. More information at troy.edu/artspark.
From Troy Public Radio, this is In Focus, and I'm Carolyn Hutchison. With today's round-the-clock news cycle and preoccupation with cell phones and screens, sleep may be hard to come by. For 30 years, Dr. Justin Thomas has been involved with health psychology and behavioral sleep medicine. He is director of the UAB Behavioral Sleep Medicine Clinic, and he joins us from Birmingham. Dr. Thomas, welcome to the program.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Thomas, how did you get interested in the field of sleep disorders?
It's kind of a funny story. I was hired as a sleep technologist to run sleep studies at UAB at night to pay for undergraduate education. So it started out just as a job to get me through school, and I kind of fell in love with sleep medicine, and the rest is history.
You know, we have people who are using cell phones and social media constantly. I look at them and think they're getting text neck. Does this have an effect on sleep?
It definitely does. I mean, there's two aspects of using any type of smartphone and social media in the evenings. The first that I like to emphasize in clinic is light exposure. Light impacts our circadian rhythms, and light tells us that it's time to be awake. And so if the sun has set and it's close to bedtime and we get on any light emitting device, we're basically telling our brain to wake up and stay awake for a while.
Are we talking more about adults or teenagers or kids even younger?
I really started mostly in the adult sleep medicine world, but Children's Hospital of Alabama needed somebody to provide behavioral sleep medicine services. So I opened up a pediatric clinic. And so we now see all ages from, we kind of jokingly say, from birth to death.
What are the concerns you have when these patients come to you and they're suffering?
We do ask about electronic device usage, social media consumption. Kids are more sensitive to light than adults at times. There's some really interesting studies that have been looking at that specifically. And so we're in the kids side of the clinic. We really try to assess how much people are on light emitting devices and how that's impacting their ability to fall asleep and stay asleep, and on the adult side as well. And I think once people start to develop insomnia symptoms, they kind of take a life of their own on, and it gets to be very difficult to treat.
So if they're not sleeping, what about the next day's effectiveness?
What we find for people with insomnia is that what they report most is difficulties thinking, concentrating, focusing, maybe some irritability, fatigue.
So how do you retrain them with their sleeping patterns?
I think the first step, focus on sleep hygiene. It's like not drinking caffeine after noon, avoiding screens in a couple hours before bedtime. Then we move into what we call cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI for short. That is mostly behavioral approaches so that people don't have to rely on medications. In CBTI, we will often teach relaxation strategies. It's really helpful in addressing stress during the day, but at night, it promotes a sense of calm and relaxation, but it also gives your brain something to do as you're waiting to fall asleep. So you're not thinking about what you have to do the next day or stressful things in your life. The main ingredients to CBTI, we always tell people, if you have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, don't lay in bed tossing and turning. Get out of bed and do a relaxing activity in dim light and get back into bed when you feel sleepy.
Does it work to try to catch up on sleep on the weekend?
It can, to an extent. If somebody is very sleep deprived during the week, it's far better to try to catch up a little bit on the weekends. But people have to realize that if you're sleep deprived during the week, you can't completely catch up. So that constant sleep deprivation does do some long-term harm.
You know, we started out talking about electronic devices. Are you seeing more problems on the increase?
I think within the last 5 to 10 years, the biggest issue we see is people just being on screens too late at night, waking up in the middle of the night and getting back on a screen or checking their phone. And that impacts The circadian system, as I mentioned earlier, is probably one of the more problematic behaviors we see now.
And if you see children literally getting addicted
Mhm.
to these screens, whether it's gaming or whatever, staying in touch with their friends, what do you advise parents to do?
We really find that can be a challenge in teenagers. In younger kids, it's easier to say, put the devices up, make sure they don't have access to them. Teenagers, they can hop out of bed and go grab a device. And so then, we try to work with the teen and the adult, make everybody on the same page. But at the end of the day, regardless of the age, we just really emphasize the harm that can come from being on devices in the evenings.
When you mention the light emitting from these devices,
Mhm.
isn't there such a thing as a screensaver that is a blue light block? Does that really help?
They do. There's been a couple of studies that actually looked at the filters that the devices themselves have, and they do help a little bit reduce the amount of blue wavelength light or wavelengths around the blue spectrum, because that's really what impacts your circadian system the most. The red wavelengths affects your circadian system the least. They also make screens that you can put on your devices. So in theory, if you really needed to be on a device, you could turn your device's blue light blocking filter or night mode on, and you could use a screen. They make blue light blocking glasses, and you could use all three, and then the amount of blue wavelength light would be dramatically reduced.
What do you think about radios or devices that play different sounds like the sea or babbling brooks to sort of calm the mind?
They do. I think that the thing that people need to be mindful of as far as sounds in the evening is what you want is something that's what we call white noise. It's kind of constant. You'll hear about people that will fall asleep with their TV on. The downside to that is, if you've ever watched TV, the TV show is one volume and the commercials are way louder. And your brain pays attention to these changes in volume. So that can be harmful, but a fan or some sort of constant noise can actually be relaxing and drown out any ambient noise that could disrupt sleep.
What is the effect of air temperature and body temperature on the ability to go to sleep and stay asleep?
Most evidence suggests that people sleep a little bit better with it cooler. Weighted blankets have become a thing to help with sleep because you just wouldn't want the weighted blanket to be too warm. The warmer we get, the harder it is to sleep. Your temperature actually declines while you sleep and reaches its lowest point a couple of hours before your natural wake up time.
What else do you recommend for a good night's sleep?
I would say two things. What we see a lot of people is putting too much faith in consumer wearables, whether they're a watch or a ring that tells them about their sleep. There's this term called orthosomnia. And orthosomnia is where these types of devices can actually make your sleep worse because you start obsessing over your sleep. So I discourage people from worrying about these sleep scores and sleep metrics. There are some resources online. There's an app called CBTI Coach, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and to prevent some of the issues. But if somebody does find themselves with sleep issues, speak to a physician and feel free to check out like a CBTI Coach app so that they can try to do something to help themselves before they have to go in and see someone like me.
How do you weigh in on sleep meds?
I think there's a place for them. The American College of Physicians put out a statement several years ago that CBTI should be the first approach. And if that doesn't work, then we should consider meds. But most people get meds first. There is a place for it with acute insomnia. The problem with medications, I think, is that people very quickly and easily become dependent. And then they're kind of stuck on meds forever. And that's something that I don't like to see.
Dr. Thomas, I want to thank you for your time today and your insights. I have an idea that many of your listeners will want to check out your recommendations.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I love talking about sleep.
That was Dr. Justin Thomas, Associate Professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurobiology at UAB Heersink School of Medicine. He is Director of the UAB Behavioral Sleep Medicine Clinic in the UAB Sleep-Wake Disorders Center. Thanks for joining us for In Focus, which is a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Carolyn Hutchison, and this is listener-supported Troy Public Radio.